Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest and a very good friend of mine, Ally Phillips. Ally, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very, very excited to be here.
Very excited to have you here. Very excited. Now, the last 6 to 8 months of your life has had a pretty big change of scenery and just a pretty big change of lifestyle overall. You've moved to Ireland. You've become a mum. It's a big question, but how's it going?
It is. Look, everything is going great. It has been probably the biggest 6 months of transformation in my life. I think I was only talking to my mother-in-law about it yesterday, about how much change I've gone through in the last 6 months. I think most people will maybe just have a baby or maybe have a baby and move a house, but maybe not new baby, new house, new job, new country all at once. So given everything that's changed, things are going really well.
Good. I'm glad to hear. And I'm really excited to have you here today and talk about your journey, your career, and particularly with a particular focus on women and mothers in business. I think it's a conversation that is really important to talk about and a conversation I think we're starting to hear a lot more about as well. But I guess, Ally, our relationship kind of goes back a little way now, or a long way now. You were probably the first female industry mentor that I ever had. And
oh, it's nice.
It is. And I remember meeting you for the very first time on Bridge Road in Richmond, and we were walking your dogs. And I feel like the very first question I asked you was, what type of marketing should I get into? Which now just seems like such a wildly broad question.
I know how things have changed, huh?
I know. But you were so good at asking me questions and prodding and poking me and finding out what I valued. And I feel like I walked away from that conversation just being not just so clear on where I wanted to go, but I think also just so in awe of you and your mindset and the way that you just approached decision making, I think was really inspiring for me. And since then, I feel like I've come to you for so much career advice. And I feel like all of these major decisions that I've made probably over the last 7 years or so, I feel like you've kind of been there for, in a way. You've had this really subjective, but also really objective advice and an opinion that I've needed. So I'm really excited to have you here. I'm really excited to talk to you. I'm excited for everyone to hear about you. So thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Zara. That was very, very wonderful. And I'll just say it's right. The awe is right back at you. What you've done is amazing and you should be so, so incredibly proud of yourself. But thank you. That was a wonderful intro.
And so today we're going to really dive into women, mothers in business. I know personally throughout my career, there's been so many really impactful women along the way, some as mentors. Sometimes I didn't even know that they were mentors, but I feel like they've just taught me so many different lessons, everything from, trusting in myself and believing in myself to how to overcome imposter syndrome and setting boundaries and the importance of time management, which I'm still working on. But my goal through this episode and more episodes to come is really just to inspire women to take the leap, to trust themselves and to really champion one another. And so
amazing.
One thing that I guess where we can start is thinking back to kind of that first meeting that we had and that first coffee together. From memory, I hope I'm right, you were working in marketing research, but now obviously I'm dialing into on the other side of the world. So can you kind of talk our listeners through a little bit about your journey, your career journey, and how you got to marketing research to where you are now?
Yeah, for sure. So I have had quite a diverse journey, and I think it's really interesting because my career journey might be interesting for some. I don't know. It's not super interesting. But I find what is interesting is that I think when you're younger, you sort of think there's one path, or that you're going to find an area and then double down in it. And if I spoke to myself 2 years, 5 years, 10 years ago, I'd have no idea that I would be where I am now. I just wouldn't have painted that path. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind when people are considering what they're going to do for work, or what next job they want to get into, or even what business they want to start. But for me, so my journey I actually started off in data analytics. I don't even know if you know that about me.
Data analytics, there you go.
Yeah, data analytics. I majored in statistics when I went to uni.
Wow.
Which was, it was all about practicality. But anyway, majored in statistics, started off in data analytics, and worked in an agency for different FMCG companies. And did that for a few years. And then I moved into probably one of the earlier pivotal roles for me when I moved over to Mars Australia. And the reason that it was such an impactful job for me, I moved into their insights and strategy team. But the reason it was so impactful was because I worked with these women who were just incredible mentors for me. And, you talk about women who have had impact for you. They were just such inspiration for me because they were excellent at their job, but they nailed their jobs, and they were excellent leaders through being themselves. And that had a really big impact on me and who I've become as a leader today. But yeah, when it went to work at Mars within the insights and strategy team, I was there for about 4 or 5 years. And then I moved to Melbourne just sort of for a personal reason. And that sort of triggered me to leave Mars and move back to agency life. And I spent 5 years in different agencies. This is when we would have met. And I was working in different market research agencies and management consulting across about 5 years. And in that time, I was picking up expertise in different methodologies, I guess you can say. So quant research, qual research. I went from heavy data analytics through to running focus groups, through to brand strategy, and running management consulting projects as well. Did that for a while, and I did really love it, and I learnt a lot. I learnt a lot about pressure, which I'll talk about later. Yeah. And then I did that until a client actually tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, will you come work for us and join our research team internally?" And that was when I entered into the wagering industry and started working at Sportsbet. And that again was another sort of pivotal moment for me in my career. And mainly because it was actually just such a really wonderful company to join, and they really, really supported my development. And I've grown so much through the people I've met, but also just the culture that company had. So I went to Sportsbet, and after not too long, I realized I wanted to get out of this sort of niche that I had found myself in, which was sort of research and strategy. And I wanted to be in a role where I understood actually how a business runs and how a business operates. So I'm sort of put the feelers out, and they moved me into a commercial marketing role. And that was one of the scarier things that I've done in my career, mainly because I had sort of left the specialty that I had been building and really focused on for 10 years, moved into a heavily commercial role where, back then I didn't know how a P&L ran, and all of a sudden I was responsible for a line on the P&L. So it was a brand new skill set I had to adopt. But again, so glad I did it. So glad that I went into the challenge, because after not long, I think it was about 6 months, they promoted me to lead that team. So I was head of that team. It was my first sort of senior leadership position. And it was pretty big. That then, with that came a lot of pressure. It was very, very closely tied to business performance. I was across the numbers every day in all the performance meetings. And it was a lot of sort of hustle. It was that sort of role. Loved it, learned a lot, worked with a great boss. And then again, after a few years, I felt like I'd made my mark, and I actually wanted to stretch my thinking and stretch my skill set again. And they shifted me into a role where I was now looking after a team of 45 across data science, tech, product, and commercial. It was a big team, and we were basically that team, that cross-functional team, was responsible for building different personalization capabilities for the business. So that again was a new challenge for me, because I'd never worked with tech before. It was a whole new language that I had to learn. The poor techies had to get used to me asking millions of questions in every meeting. But they loved it. I don't think they'd had anyone who was so intrigued by what they did before. But yeah, that was again really great role. Loved it. And that then sort of leads me to now, which is a move to Ireland. I've moved to Paddy Power, which is the sister company, the Irish sister company to Sportsbet. And now my role is Director of Customer Value Management. So I sit on the leadership team at Paddy Power. And what that role is effectively, it kind of covers the different areas that I used to do at Sportsbet. And it's now the next progression or the next step within that area. And yeah, I think that pretty much. Oh, and then sorry, that I had a baby. So now I'm on maternity leave.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. I mean, yeah, there's some of that obviously that I knew, and then there's some of that is news, which is amazing. I mean, your new role at Paddy Power also sounds huge. Is there something specifically that drew you to this role?
I think this role in particular, so as I said, it's sort of the next level of progression in terms of, so before I was ahead of looking after a commercial marketing area and then looking after this sort of product and technology building capabilities. Now I've moved into a director level, which is effectively umbrella for both of those. It's somewhat slightly different because it's a different company and things aren't always the same. But so it was the next logical step from a progression perspective. It's now sitting on the leadership team for the business. So there's obviously a lot of new experiences that I am getting through that. And so that was obviously a really big draw card as well. But then honestly as well, the move to Ireland was my husband needed to go home. My husband's from Cork. He missed his family. He really, it was time he went home, and it was time that we spent some time there. And when this opportunity came up, it just made sense, even though I was 6 months pregnant when we moved. So like, I don't know, I wouldn't wish it on. I mean, I wouldn't do it now. It would be so much harder now with a 4.5-month-old, but I wouldn't wish it on anyone either. But it made sense. We just did it. When you're having a baby, your life's going to change anyway. So why not change everything?
Change everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What's it like being a female director in this world?
I think if people looked at these businesses from the outside, I think they would think that they're a really blokey culture. And they're not. Like, I've been really lucky to work for companies where they really, really focus heavily on building a culture of support, diversity, and inclusion. And so because of that, and I've worked with incredible leaders in my time. And so because of that, I never felt unheard or ignored or anything like that. So it is, it can be a challenge though, from a mindset perspective, because whilst you can tell yourself, right, like the culture's great, everyone here hears me, they're all here to support me, there's still internal work that you have to do to make sure that you feel like you belong.
Yeah.
Right? Because you enter a room and, I'll give you an example. My last leadership team I sat on, not my current one, the last one, it was a leadership team of 9 and I was the only female.
Yeah.
So 1 in 9, and which is probably not that uncommon. But the first time I entered that new leadership team meeting, I was super questioning myself. I was like, why am I here? They'd be talking about sports and racing all day. I barely watched it. I knew how to do my job and I knew how to do it well and I knew what information I needed, but I wasn't watching the races all the time. And so I couldn't involve myself in that talk. And it made me feel like I don't belong. Why am I here? They don't need me here. All of that, imposter syndrome stuff that everyone has. And I noticed it then playing out. I would notice that in these meetings, I would shrink, like physically I would shrink. I wouldn't speak up as much. I just wouldn't voice my opinion as much, which is unlike me. And it was maybe after 3 or 4 of these, I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what? Yeah. I'm meant to be there. And what I realized was they needed me, not because I should mold myself to be one of them, but because I was different. And I lent in I lent into the fact that I was different. And what I mean by that is they needed a different voice, they needed a different perspective, but they also needed a different energy. So, you know, with me and who I am, and if I lent into my authentic self, what I bring is a bit of friendliness, a bit of bubbliness, a smile, you know, probably a gentler energy than what those leadership team meetings were used to seeing and used to feeling. And it wasn't until I realized that actually the fact that I am different is what makes me even more needed in this room.
Yeah.
That's what has really helped me. Reminding myself of that has really helped me ever since then to go, do you know what? You deserve to be here. You have a right. And you being different is actually the reason why you're needed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's phenomenal. I think making that distinction, I mean, it's so hard to make that distinction. And, you know, obviously being in a room with 8, you know, males, but also just sometimes when you do initially step into a leadership role, just that, like you said, that imposter syndrome is something that's so hard to overcome. But I mean, as long as I've known you, you've always had this like incredible attitude, like give it a go, get in there, get your hands dirty, like just like a go-getter. Like, where does that come from? You know, is there, you know, you spoke about doing internal work, and I know there's a lot of things you do outside of work in terms of like spirituality and manifestation and those kinds of things. But where does that kind of like innate part of you come from?
I don't know. I do have a sense of drive and ambition, and even, you know, on maternity leave, I'm convinced. I'm like, do you know what? I'm going to launch a mentorship program. Why not? Let's just try. And you know, I may not get there, and that's also okay. But
you probably will.
Hopefully, we'll see. But I think, I don't know, like that go-getter part of me, I'm not sure. Like, I don't know, you know, I could probably go see a therapist for some of it because it drives my husband crazy sometimes. But I think for me, I've always had this innate need to have impact. And impact for me, it's probably multifaceted. So it'll be impact on people. And like, I want to know, and it's like, I don't know, I'm a little selfish in the way that I don't believe that true altruism exists. Like, you know, doing something for the pure sake of just doing it, because the reality is I get a little
something
juice from it. Yeah, exactly. You know, like when you do something nice with someone and they're really grateful, it feels good. Like it just feels good. And so for me, impact means being able to help people, or being able, like, you know, having an interaction with someone and them thinking like, oh, I'm so glad that I spoke to her today, or she's really had an impact on my career. Like those conversations just melt my heart and make me cry so much. Yeah. So I think there's something in that, with that, like this need for impact. And I think as well, you know, like you said, like I've done a lot of work, outside work on mindset, and really focused on, I think it was just before COVID, I really, really dug into this stuff, and I built a lot of self-awareness on how are my thoughts impacting the world around me, and learnt a lot about how actually it is your thoughts that drive your actions, and your actions create the world that you live in, right? And I think having dug into that work, I realized that it's only what you see. It's how you see yourself and your capabilities. That perception is everything. And if you see yourself as being capable of doing something, or you see yourself as being able to nail something, that it's the number one influencer on how you show up, and therefore how others see you, and therefore what opportunities come your way. And I think, I don't know, since learning that, since digging into that, I've therefore maybe trained myself to always be like, do you know what, I'm going to go after this, I'm going to give it a shot. So I don't know. Sorry, it's a bit of a long answer, but I think that kind of covers it.
Absolutely. It sounds like that's the impact is the thing that just drives you to keep creating, whether it's creating, you know, and we'll get into it, but you've got a few side businesses that you work on as well. But just like generally, impact is what motivates you and what kind of keeps you going.
Definitely. And there is, I also get a little kick when I've learned something new and I can, actually implement that. So there's always that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going back to, I guess, like being in that boardroom, walking into that kind of a new situation, sometimes business and the business world in certain situations isn't always kind to women. It's definitely not a generalization, and there's a lot of change, and there's a lot of like really amazing people. I know the guys that I work with are just phenomenal. And I just couldn't imagine doing what I'm doing without them. But I know that and I have heard some unfortunate situations and unfortunate conversations that people have had to have. But what's kind of the toughest challenge that you've had to overcome in the last kind of, decade plus of your career? And how did you do it?
I think the biggest challenge I went through was when I burnt out. And I'm sure I've actually probably told you about this before, because I'm sure I would have used it in a way of like, don't do what I did.
Inspiration mentorship. I'm sure you would have.
But so this was years ago. I was working in management consulting, and the reason this is probably the biggest challenge that I went through is because I had to make the decision to put myself first, and also stand up to someone who didn't care about people. He just didn't care about people at all. And I have some anecdotes for that. But also do it at a time in my career where, I don't know, you feel this pressure that you've got to keep going. And like if I quit now and I leave now, what is this going to do for the future of my career? Am I going to have opportunities? Am I going to be unemployed for 6 months? Like just like all of these fearful thoughts, right? But I had to do it. And I remember, so I was working in management consulting, and there's no this is maybe a nice way of putting it actually. The person who was running the company, he was just a misogynist and didn't give a shit about people really. Like for instance, our water filter broke and the man would not replace it, and we couldn't use tap water from the building because there was like something wrong with the pipes. So we had to buy bottled water ourselves. It's just like water is like, it's the bottom of the
it's the bottom of the food pyramid.
It's the bottom pyramid. Like we need water. But anyway, I was working for this man, and it's management consulting, right? And management consulting is known for pretty bad hours. But this was 9 p.m. was an early night, and 1 a.m., 2 a.m. were regular occurrences. I was leading an engagement with our team, and there's a team, maybe 6 of us, and we were like at the client's office. So it was also, from a cultural perspective, you're like stuck in a meeting room of a client's office like every day. It's not fun. There's like, it's yucky, for lack of a better word. And I just remember I was working so hard, so many hours, and for a man who didn't respect us, and I didn't respect, because I didn't have any admiration for leaders who threw their people under the bus. And it got to the point, it's a bit gross, but it got to the point where I projectile vomited in the bathroom. Because I was so stressed, and because I'm a physical stressor, not an emotional stressor, I didn't realize it. So like, I'd get a migraine or a headache. I'm like, oh, I've just got a migraine or a headache. I wasn't getting emotional, so I didn't realize how stressed I was. Anyway, so there I was, like wiping off my vomit from like literally the walls of the bathroom.
Oh my God.
So bad. And I kind of like looked at myself in the mirror. I was like, hey, there's something's
not right here. Yeah,
something's not right. And so that Monday I walked into the office and I quit, and I had nothing to go to. I had no job lined up. And, like you worry, you're like, shit, how am I going to, at that point I didn't have a mortgage, but how am I going to pay rent, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, I quit, had nothing to go to. And the owner then tried to convince me to stay, and he was like dangling these carrots, and he was saying, oh, do you know, I'll make you head of culture, and we'll change everything, and let's make the team engaged. And he was trying to give me something that he knew I wanted. But really, I saw through his bullshit and I saw how inauthentic he was. And so I stuck by it and I quit. Had 6 weeks off. It was the summer of Ally. It was so much fun. Like I just, went to the gym, went in, had coffees. I took the dogs for a walk. Like it was such a nice 6 weeks. And then ended up working. Actually, I think this is when I was working at the agency when we met.
Yeah.
But it was.
I remember this story.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I remember being totally shook to my core. But I remember it well.
I'm sorry, it's quite graphic. But I suppose, the reason it was such a challenge was because I did have to make that choice of like, you have to put yourself first. And also to stand up to someone who was very manipulative and also like he was the type of man who would, for women only, touch them on the elbow and call them doll. You know, that type of like, it was gross. And so I had to stand up to him, and it's not easy to do.
No way. And I mean, it's horrible that was an experience and that was kind of where it got to. But I mean, burnout is something that unfortunately I do hear a lot of people go through. And particularly, and maybe this is just the confirmation bias, like this is the world of people that I'm talking to anyway, but it is something that I hear is quite common in females, in either in leadership roles or as they're progressing into leadership roles, as they're striving for that element of growth. It is something that I'm hearing more and more about, and not necessarily that it's happening right now, but more so that people are opening up about it, I feel, or particularly within my sphere anyway, people are opening up about it and talking about burnout being something that they've experienced. And, you know, I mean, I'm glad that it's something that people are talking about now, because it is like being able to recognize those trigger points and recognize when you're getting to a point of burnout, or even before you get to that point, is so, so important. And sharing that so that other people can kind of recognize, you know, the difference that you just said, like emotional versus physical stressor. I'm definitely an emotional stressor and I like hold it in. I do get headaches, but it's more so like I either like close everyone off and I'm like, just head down, get it done, no emotion. But yeah, I mean, maybe we can talk about it a little bit more, less so the vomit on the walls, but more so, more so like, you know, you mentioned that after you sort of realized that you kind of showed your stress physically, what other kind of triggers or how have you used that experience, as horrible as that experience was, to kind of like shape like creating boundaries and like what the next few years of your career looked like?
It's interesting. I'd say for me, what it taught me was, one, who is actually the type of person that I want to work for. And I don't think I acknowledged how important that was at the time. I think I was younger, obviously, because it was in the past, but I was at the point where you're thinking more around status and income and not necessarily culture as much or people as much. And there was one big lesson was who is the type of person that I want to work for. And so that was one thing I learned from it. And I'd say as I continued on my career over the years, I've probably pitched things up. And I wouldn't say that I went, you know, straight into my next job and then was amazing with boundaries, because I definitely had late nights at the next one as well. And the thing is, what I have learned is pressure isn't a bad thing. I think, and this is something that I teach my teams and my mentees, we have to go through some pressure in order to keep growing. And there's this, I'm not sure if you've seen it, the pressure versus performance curve. There is this, no, I'll show it to you after. There's a curve, and basically it kind of goes up like an upside down, like a hill. And basically what it shows is that the more stress you're under, the higher you're able to perform. But at some point, if the stress goes too much, you fall down the other side of the hill and you're going into burnout. And so what it means is that some level of pressure is needed for you to perform well. Because if you don't have enough, then you're bored and you're twiddling your thumbs.
Absolutely.
So you need some pressure. The other thing though that I've learned through my journey is that the more pressure you're put under, that curve actually then moves to the right for you. So what it means is that as you continue to grow, you're actually able to handle more stress and you're able to handle more pressure. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense, right? It's why, you know, you don't just all of a sudden become a CEO because, you know, you have to sort of go through a journey and build that resilience. Mm-hmm. And I'd say I built that awareness of knowing, okay, I'm going to put myself into moments of hard work, pressure, out of my comfort zone. But when I'm starting to feel like it's too much, I need to be overt about it, and I need to have a direct conversation with the person that can make a difference. And usually that's your manager, right?
Yeah.
And so since then, I've just been just having really honest and frank conversations with them about it. Like, and being clear on how I'm feeling and how that may then impact the quality of my work, but making sure that we're then having conversations around, it's not to say, let's drop everything, but let's talk about priorities. What is it that you need? What is it that we really need to get done? Let's focus on that. Mm-hmm. The other thing as well, honestly, I got really, really good at managing my time. I got like, you just have to realize that your time is your own, and you have to realize that, you know, it's actually amazing how much you can get done in a day, particularly how much you can get done in a day, particularly now with AI. Like, it's just, it is unreal. And I think a lot of us sort of go through the day we're just doing the next task. We're just doing the next thing. We're reading the next email. We're replying to the Slack, versus having a bit more structure and approaching our day and going, okay, what are the 3 most important things I need to do? Bang, 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 put them in my calendar. That's non-negotiable. I'm doing those 3 things. And then if I get some emails answered, that's a tick. If I do an extra thing, that's a tick. But having that kind of structure and planning out my diaries, sometimes weeks and months in advance, that also really helps me just manage that pressure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, I feel like you've always been, no, that was perfect. No, I think you've always been really good as long as I've known you at time management and like productivity. And it's always been, I feel like you've always been able to achieve so much. And it sounds like there's an element of like, I know you also have really good boundaries, and you're one of the people, there was a few, you know, going back to kind of like women and mentors in my career. Before I started Inflection, the organization that I was working at, she was also really incredible at having boundaries. Just something that, particularly in agency life, is so uncommon. And if there's anyone that works in a marketing agency or just an agency in general that's hearing this, it's so common for like messages to be sent outside of hours. I know you're not allowed to anymore, but like, you know, for the first decade of working in agencies, it was like outside of hours work, staying late, you know, just no lunch breaks, like all of these things that like you actually need to be able to productively like switch off and switch back on throughout your day. And just not being able to let go. But her name was Bonnie, and I was working with her, and she was someone that I just had kind of never met anyone that had boundaries like her. Like if something came through at 4:30 on a Thursday and it took an hour, she was like, we can't do it. And I'd be like, what do you mean we can't do it? And she's like, it's 4:30. We've only got half an hour left of the day. You're not working late. I'm not working late. And I was like, hold on a second, wait a minute. But someone's asked for this. And she's like, yeah, they should have asked for it 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
And I just remember being like, whoa, like, and she was really, and it was never done in a way that was like, my time's more important than the client's, or my priorities are more important than theirs, or anything like that. It was done in an extremely respectful way. And it was always a conversation, and it was a conversation that like was set up, I think, from the very beginning of working with clients, was like this expectation. We need a minimum of 3 days to complete a task or to turn a project around. If you send us something on a Friday afternoon, it's not going to get done. But it was all of these, you know, expectations were kind of outlined really early in the conversation. So then when something did kind of fall on at 4:30 on a Friday, it wasn't like a pushback. It was something that was like, oh, hey, remember that thing we spoke about? Sorry, but we can get to it first thing Monday morning. We'll knock it out. And we'll get it to you by the end of the day on Monday. We'll like, you know, it'll be a rush task kind of thing. And And not once working for her was there ever pushback from a single client. Was there ever kind of like bad blood? The relationships she had with her clients were phenomenal. And I think it was just because there was this like genuine respect from both parties. And it's just something that like I've just taken since working with her. It's something that I've just really tried to bring into just how I operate. And now I feel like I've got a really good understanding of why boundaries are so important. And I know it's something that you talk about a lot and we've had conversations about so many times. But how did you, or what are some of your boundaries? Like, I know that there's like time boundaries and now you've got Franklin as well. So, you know, what do the boundaries look like now?
I mean, look, I haven't gone back to work yet, so I don't know how I'm going to go with mum boundaries, but we'll see. We'll see how we go. But I think, look, all of that the client world, it rings so true. And I think for me, it comes down to, do you have a relationship that's built on trust? Yeah. And that's with your client, that's with your boss, that's with your stakeholders, whoever. And, you know, for me, some of my boundaries are like, I don't pick up a phone call after 6 p.m. unless shit has hit the fan in some way and I am absolutely needed. But if it's just a phone call and it's for like, if it's a question about something, I don't pick it up, because as soon as I start picking it up, it's like, I talk about this with my team, and it's a bit like, sometimes people get it, sometimes they don't, but it's like Pavlov's dogs, right? If you continue to reward the behavior, it's going to keep happening. Yeah. And so I don't pick up a phone call after 6 p.m. I also try not to email out of hours. I'm not always great at it. And sometimes it is more helpful for me to do it rather than not, because I know that it's clear and it's out of my mind. Yep. But often what I do for my team, or sometimes what I used to do for my team, I'd send the email, but it wouldn't be in their inbox until 8:30 in the morning. So they're not then. I don't want to sort of like perpetuate the behavior, right? Sometimes I do that. I wasn't always great at that, but I would try my best to do that. Schedule send, exactly. And sometimes I'd schedule send Slack messages, but they've already been slacking me in, which is so those are two big things, which was I have a life, and I am a really big believer in having a really solid work-life balance. And I believe that if you have a solid work-life balance, you're actually going to be a better employee, and you're going to be a better team. You're going to be happier. You're going to be more fulfilled. You're going to have space to actually think about work as well, and actually let the creativity, juices flow. Yeah. So those are two big ones I have, but they do, in order to, I think you can set boundaries, and that's great, but setting boundaries is meaningless unless you can actually hold them up. And sorry, I'm having a giggle because you and I have definitely talked about it. Yes. Yes, they are completely meaningless unless you hold them up. And if you don't respect them, then no one else is going to. But there is a caveat, and that is you have to have built a relationship of trust with the person that you're wanting to uphold that boundary. So if it's your boss still needs to know that you're going to follow through for them. Like if you are time and time again not delivering on time, or putting up shit work, you can't then expect that respect of these boundaries that you're putting in place. And so building that relationship of trust through delivering great work and delivering to expectations and managing expectations is also really important. Yeah, 100%. And what you said about I totally believe and totally agree with you, being able to switch off and let go and then kind of come back, whether it's the next day or after the weekend or whatever that time frame is, you're so much more productive. Because so much more. If you can switch off from work, and there's a really incredible, and he's totally blank from my mind, but I remember listening to his audiobook tail end of summer last year, and I'll put it in the show notes. I'll find it and I'll put it in the show notes. But he essentially talks about like this burnout phenomenon, but then also talks about like the idea of like slower growth through having like more sustainable growth. And I think that's really important is,
it might take you an extra couple of weeks to do something or whatever that looks like. But if you were able to stay healthy, stay connected within your relationships, have a better mental health, have better work-life balance throughout that 3 or 4 weeks or however long this project takes, your overall contribution, your overall productivity, and the overall result of that work is going to be so much higher that it's going to allow you to progress further anyway, because you're not scrambling and trying to get it done really, really quickly so that you can, say you got work done in I turned it around in a week, but the quality was, 75% or 70% or whatever, as opposed to turn it around in 3 weeks and it's 120%. And that person on the other side of that project is like blown away. And then it results in greater work and more work. And for the life of me, I've just totally forgotten who this guy is. But I feel like I was listening, it might've been like a podcast episode with Simon Sinek or something like that he was interviewing someone about it, but or maybe even Stephen Bartlett, like Diary of a CEO. But it was, I just totally believe that it's just so important. And I think sometimes,
absolutely,
no, you go.
And it comes back to burnout, right? Because if you're not managing those boundaries, and if you're not switching off at the end of the day, then that pressure is just going to continue to build and build and build for you, and then you do burn out. And it's not, like that's terrible for the team member, but even from a business perspective, that's very costly. So, you all of a sudden lose productivity from that person either having to take time off or leaving, and then you lose productivity and also financials from having to train up someone else. And so it is, I think it's obviously much more prevalent in businesses now where work-life balance is an important thing. But I suspect there is still plenty of businesses and plenty of leaders who don't appreciate it and who don't respect it. And it's not sustainable.
Yeah. And then I guess it really comes down to the individual to recognize what they want and how they want to live and how they want to approach their work, and to start enforcing those boundaries. And it's hard.
Exactly. It is.
Change only happens if you make change happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. I know we've touched on it a little bit in terms of like side hustles and other businesses that you're growing, and you've got the mentorship thing that you're building at the moment. But can we talk a little bit about all of these other things that you do outside of your 9 to 5?
Yes, of course. So there's a few. It's mainly 2, but one of them sort of like has spreaded tentacles and it's like merged into all these other things. So the first is it's called Check Out My Shed, and that is it's an online peer-to-peer marketplace that enables rentals to happen in between marketplace members. So like Airbnb, but for a surfboard or a tent or a drill, whatever. And that was kind of a bit of a passion project that I started with a co-founder back when we were in lockdown in COVID. And he's incredible. He's not even a techie. He's not trained, but he just learnt it all himself, and he sort of built the platform, and I built the brand and the business and the marketing. And it's been a bit of a passion project. So that's one of them. The second is a consulting agency. It's called Whisk Strategy. And this started off as a largely research, insights and strategy agency. But it's sort of evolved over the last few years. It kind of evolves based on what new passion I have at the time, if I'm completely honest. Yep. So I actually do love problem solving for businesses. So I'm still doing that. More so for smaller businesses, small, medium businesses, because it's sort of like immediate impact. But it's now starting to evolve into a business that is focused on helping other businesses with overall effectiveness. So that's how can we better make decisions through, help us solve this problem, through to help us upskill our teams so that they're better at their jobs, or help us upskill our teams so that they are more fulfilled in whatever way. And at the moment, I do have a passion for helping women in particular grow in organizations. As you said before, we've come a long way, but I do still think that there is room to grow and room in continuing to support women. And I think that there is still a lot of skills that you're kind of forced to just pick up along the way when you enter into the corporate life or when you enter into business. And they're skill, like you're not taught them at uni, you're not taught them at school. They're just things that you learn. And that's, things from managing your time, your boundaries, as we said, your stakeholders, your mindset, and also crucial skills that you need when you're working in big businesses, like how to influence outcomes, how to influence others, how should you be communicating, how do you build relationships? And some people are naturally good at those things and they do sort of excel into leadership. Others have to learn it. But I think these are skills that people should be taught. And so that's my passion project at the moment, which is this mentorship program and upskilling women in all of those different areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, my next question was, which of all of these kind of side hustles is closest to your heart? But it sounds like the mentorship that you're building out at the moment.
It is. Yeah, exactly. I think there's something I've done a lot of mentoring in the past and they've been more sort of like one-to-one mentor coaching sessions. And I love them because even in an hour, you can see like those light bulb moments that people have where they just realize, and like, we've had them and I do love them where you can have a conversation with someone and help them see a different perspective, help them reframe a limiting belief, or help them just also see how shit they're being treated from other people. Yeah. And you see them step into a space of empowerment and they're really, they feel strong, they feel courage, they feel like someone's got their back as well. Yeah. I love those sessions. And I think from a lot of them, that's where I've sort of got this idea now for, okay, how do I make this bigger? And I'm really passionate about doing this mentorship program for women, bringing a bunch of women together, getting them to network, getting them to build a support network amongst themselves, and then teaching them all these skills along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from experience, having had that experience with you and being on the other side of it as a mentee, you're incredible at it. You really are. And it is just about like helping to shift mindsets and highlight things and, like you said, like framing, understanding and helping people to recognize what's a limiting belief and what's a fact or a reality. And I think it's just like, it's so much easier for someone on the outside to kind of do that and just help you to shift your mindset.
So much easier.
I guess through all of these things, so obviously through your career, through building these businesses, what's kind of been one of the biggest lessons that you've learned from building something from the ground up that you could share with other people that are, because I guess a lot of our listeners are either just starting their career, like just starting building a business, or they're wanting to build a business, or they're like wanting to take that leap. But there's a lot of, as I know, there's a lot of like fear that comes into it. And there's a lot of like, what if I make the wrong decision? What if I start the wrong business? What if it doesn't work out? And for me, it's just fail and fail quickly. Like if it's not going to work, just move on from it, sort of thing.
It's so funny, the fear thing, right? And so this isn't my lesson, but it is something that I wanted to share. The fear thing. I'm not always great at this, but I came across this saying, and it's a question of what's the difference between fear and faith? And the reality is then there is no difference because they're both made up. Both of that, you can either sit in fear about a potential outcome. So what if this business fails? Or you can sit in faith of a potential outcome of what if this business is a success? Yeah. And neither of them are true. Neither of them have happened. But how you're choosing to act or how you're choosing to feel in that moment kind of then perpetuates your actions. It perpetuates your beliefs. It then can have impact into what reality kind of comes your way. And so when I came across that and I was like, that's really interesting. Like there is no difference between fear and faith. They're actually both made up. So make the choice of, rather than sitting in fear, you could sit in faith. Now, again, much easier said than done. Yes. But it's something that that sort of anecdote does drive me though, when it's not necessarily the big things, but the smaller things, some of the more smaller things, like if I'm having doing a high stakes presentation and I'm sitting there going, oh shit, I'm going to fail this. It's useless. It's useless thinking like that, right? So then you can reframe it into, I'm going to nail this. yeah, it is the fear. The fear thing is definitely one thing that you just have to learn how to reframe that and just act anyway. And there's that whole thing of like feel the fear and act anyway. It's true. You do have to do that. So that is, I suppose that is one lesson. The biggest lesson that I have actually learned is it's just the reality that I'm in now anyway. But for me, every day continues to be a school day. I don't know if you're feeling this as well, but when you're entering into business and when you're building a business from the ground up, every day is a school day. And so the biggest skill that you actually need to develop, or that I think you need to develop, it's not necessarily how to do your social media or how to do your finances or how to get more leads. I actually think one of the biggest skills that people who are entering into business need to develop is that mental battle of being able to face into unknown challenges and unknown situations every day, and feeling that voice in your head that goes, oh shit, I don't know what I'm doing. Oh God, I don't know how to respond to this. I don't know what to do next. And then just moving through that and continuing to learn, continuing to grow, continuing to push through those challenges. I think that has been the biggest learning for me, is to go, do you know what? Every day is a school day, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But
I love
is,
that.
Again, hard.
It's hard, but I totally love it. And I totally agree. I think that, and it's interesting, I was talking to my husband about it last night, is that growth only happens through things that you've never done before. And usually things that you've never done before are scary. Maybe you don't necessarily have 100% of the skill set to achieve that thing. But if you just kind of sit in this world of complacency and contentment and like things that you're totally capable of, then you're not actually going to grow and you're not going to move to that next level. And, you know, through like performance management and like team development, I'd call it like stretch targets and like stretch goals. Like people, they can't quite reach it, but if they stretch that little bit further, then they will get there and they will reach it. And I totally agree that I think that if you aren't growing, then you're kind of sitting still. And that means you're never actually challenging yourself, which means you're never actually going to expand your mindset and you're never going to learn a new skill, which, you know, as part of business, there's so many, like you said, every day is a school day. There's so many new things that are happening. There's so many new challenges that are coming up, new opportunities that are coming up that you might want to take on, but you don't know how to take them on. And it's just an element of saying, okay, well, yeah, sit in the fear and go for it. Have the faith that you're going to be able to execute that task.
Exactly. And just there's a quote, I think it's Henry Ford, and I might butcher it, but that's fine. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. Yes. So if you never move yourself out of the comfort zone, you're going to be in the same life, the same situations time and time again, which is fine, right? Like for some people,
totally,
that's lovely, but it's not for everyone. And so I think if you do want to grow, you do have to push yourself into those moments that scare the shit out of you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And one of those other moments that is growing and is totally changing and is a totally different skill set is becoming a mum.
That's so scary in many other ways.
There's a lot of change that happens and it's all new unless you've done it before. It's all new. So, and I mean, like we said at the beginning of the episode, you have recently become a mum to a beautiful little boy. And he's just the cutest little thing. But
he's so cute. He's actually so cute.
Talk about the experience of becoming a mum?
I can. Becoming a mum, it's unlike it. I don't know. Like it is unlike nothing else. Like, you know, I think, you know, offline or off the air, we were talking about how, like for me, I didn't have that sort of like love bomb that movies or society kind of makes you feel that you should feel when your baby's born and when they're in your arms. And for me, love grew minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, which I've learned since then that it is actually a very, very normal experience. And mums feel a lot of guilt for feeling that way, but it's actually very, very normal. But I didn't have that love bomb straight away, but the love that you do have for your child, it's like nothing else, because there's all of a sudden this new being on this world that you have this unique connection to that no one else has. Yeah. And they know you, like they just know you. And it's so wonderful. And that connection, it's so beautiful. And like, you know, I was saying this to you off air as well, but like my son, when he sees me, he has a special smile for me. And it's so lovely because it's like he just knows me. And that connection is, I don't know, it's indescribable. And it's such a lovely, lovely thing to get to feel. Yeah. And I never knew that it was missing in my life either until I had him. Like I never knew that he was missing until he's here. But the change is astronomical. Like it is, you go from sitting in like meeting rooms discussing business performance and numbers and people and finances, and it's all like go, go, go and big, you know, meaty things. And then next minute you're lying on the floor stressing about how much tummy time your 3-month-old is doing and like trying to like entertain them by making stupid faces to just get them to hold their head up while they're on their tummy. Like it's just, your world is so, so different. And I think for me, that transformation, that change, like every woman, every mum goes on their own personal journey. For me, I'm quite independent. I'm quite ambitious. I'm quite career driven. I love my free time, and I love routine and freedom. Like freedom is a really big value of mine. So for me, the shift into like a really big challenge for me was now adjusting into a world where my day, my time, my life kind of has to flow on someone else's clock. Yeah. And I was warned that would happen, and because people knew me. But that's still, people knew that I would struggle with that, and I do. It is a struggle, but I'm still learning. I think, you know, for me, I've learned, and this might be helpful for other women like me, but I learned that you kind of have to go with the flow. And I'll still have, like, you know, I was talking about my 3 most important tasks. Like that's how I used to start my workday. I still do that now. Now one of them might be the washing. Yeah. I still start with, I tackle my day going, what are the 3 things that I want to get done today? And then I just try and do them when he's napping or when he's giving me 20 minutes to myself. But that is a big change, and that shift in independence and that shift in freedom of time, that's something that it does take a bit of work to get used to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And do you feel like, I know it's still relatively early in the journey, but do you feel like has having a son and like this change that you've just spoken about, has it shifted any other sort of perspective in terms of, you know, someone else I was talking to recently had a kid and they said that it actually motivated them to work harder. And then there's other people that have said that having a child kind of changes their perspective and their work-life balance, and they kind of shift away from work and focus solely on the family unit. And has there been kind of a perspective shift or a motivator for you in any way?
I think, yes and no. So like I said, like I'm a big believer in the importance of work-life balance. Yep. And so that hasn't changed. And even it's, you know, it's even more so now. And there is something, it doesn't sit well with me that you have a child and then you're not with them for 5 days a week. Like that just doesn't sit well with me. And so how I want to, I guess, portion my time through a week, like the way I think about that will probably shift a bit now since becoming a mum. But my drive hasn't changed. And if anything, it's now there's someone else that I want to work hard for. Or there's someone else that I want to provide for. And so I think there's like you do get this, I mean, I shouldn't say you because everyone's different, but like I did get this sort of like strong maternal instinct of, no, like I want to protect my son. I want to provide for him. I want to make sure he's safe. And I want to make sure, like, you know, you just want the best for them. Like you do. And that then makes me go, it it didn't necessarily like super boost my drive, but the drive is still there.
Yeah. I can't imagine a world where your drive would shift or reduce in any way. So yeah, I definitely expected that if anything, he would have been almost fuel to that motivation and to that drive. Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's really inspiring too. I think it's a really important part of the conversation. And again, like I know it's kind of coming up more and more, and there's a lot of people talking about it, is just like being a mum and also being really passionate about what you do in your work week, whether that be for yourself, whether that be for somebody else, and just that it's okay to be incredibly passionate about being a mum, but also be incredibly passionate about your work and what you're trying to achieve and the impact.
And it's okay to do both.
Yeah.
It's so fine to do both. And I think, I don't know, maybe we think that we're not allowed to. Like maybe we used to think that if you're a mum, you had to be a mum, or if you're career driven, you have to be career driven. But why can't you do both?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know one of the questions that we kind of spoke about and that I kind of wanted to chat about was, and this kind of goes into that, is like any like stereotypes, misconceptions that kind of exist in the world around working mothers or around mothers or women that are wanting to work and not be a mother or whatever that looks like. But are there any of those kind of misconceptions or stereotypes that you want to challenge?
I suppose it's really just that one, right? Because I think, I don't know of what other stereotypes there are, because I suppose I don't entertain them. Yeah, I don't know. They could just be in one ear out the other. I try not to entertain them. And I think, but perhaps there is that one of, you know, if you're going to be a mother, be a mother, or if you're going to be a career woman, be a career woman. But you can do both. And I mean, I plan to, and I plan to do both well. I plan to be present with my child. I plan to be really comfortable with the balance of my time with him and work. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I plan to, you know, create a reality where I'm really comfortable with how much time I'm spending with him, and that the time I am spending with him is really valuable time, and that I'm really, really present rather than one eye on him, one on the phone. I think the other thing is, whilst, you know, there's this whole thing of like multitasking is a myth, like no one's good at multitasking. Yes, that like, I know that there's a whole bunch of science to back that up, and I'm not going to like pretend otherwise. But what I would say, after becoming a mom, like women have a crazy ability of holding multiple things in their mind. Like, you know, the whole mental load concept, it comes from that, because we hold all of these things. It's like, it's all stored in there. Like it's all in these little drawers and stuff. It's just, we hold all this information in our mind. And like, you know, like, I don't want to generalize, like men are the same, definitely. But I think after having a child, and when you are the primary caregiver, it's something that happens. And so if we can hold multiple things in our mind, and we can hold multiple priorities, why can't we therefore be a great mum and also really passionate about your work? Like I think there's definitely room for both. Yeah,
I love that. And I think that's it's just such a important message. And I think it's just such a, again, I think it is coming out more and more, and I think there's a lot more conversation around it. But yeah, I guess it's also a really nice kind of like bow on the episode to kind of tie it up a little bit. But maybe is there any kind of other things that you would like to talk about? Are there any, do you want to dive into the mentoring thing a little bit more? Just obviously a lot of the listeners are, again, like I said, people that are listening today are probably at a point where either they're wanting to take a change or they're wanting to make a change. But yeah, or are there any other ventures that you're like itching to
No other ventures, God no. I'd say it would be very bad for my marriage. No, look, I suppose, about the mentorship, honestly, I just think there is so much that I wish I was taught or I learned before I started working, or really early on in my career. I think navigating corporate life, navigating business, there's a lot hidden that we don't realize, and no one ever tells us. And that's when you do get stuck in these cycles of, overwork because you think that more hours equals more pay, and it doesn't. Or you get in this cycle of always saying yes to everything, never putting yourself first, projectile vomiting and burning out. There are these cycles that happen unless you have these fundamental skills that teach you how to navigate that corporate life. And so that's what it's really focusing on. And so if, and I do really think that it would be helpful for women to learn these things on like how to manage their time, how to manage their boundaries, their stakeholders, their self-talk. Like that's a big one.
Huge.
How we talk. We are so cruel to ourselves. Like so it's like we save the harshest words for ourselves.
Yeah.
And I reckon if we asked ourselves the question of would you ever say that to a mate about how you talk to yourself? Like you'd never say half the things you say to yourself to someone else. They're so cool. So there's a lot of like tools and skills that I think we would benefit from if we were taught them earlier on in our career. And that's just what I hope to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, when this venture takes off, not if, when, because it's never an if with you, it's always a when, in a great way, in a really, really great and inspiring and motivating way, I think it'll be something that so many women and so many people will benefit from. But Ally, if there's a best way for people to get in contact with you, we'll put a link in the show notes, but what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to learn from you?
Just on my LinkedIn, Ally Phillips. I don't know if there's many others out there, but we can put a link in.
Yes, we'll put a link in the show notes. But Ally, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable and being honest today and sharing your story. It's like I said, you've always been such a massive inspiration for me throughout my career over the last 7-10 years or so. I don't even know how long it's been. But I feel like you've definitely helped me to gain so much more confidence in myself and stand in my own beliefs and my values and just to generally give things a go. So it's been an absolute pleasure and I'm so glad that I've been able to share you with everyone today. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Zara, and thanks so much for inviting me on. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.